Thank you, committee members. Okay, so we're just going to move item 10 forward because our presenters are here from Napier City Council. So welcome, kia ora. And we'll have Chris. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Hinawai. So I have got Ron Kingsford here and Hannah Ludlow from Napier City Council. So they've got a bit of a presentation to share shortly, but just as an introduction, so the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Napier City Council have been working on understanding the water quality of the Napier Urban Waterway network. And the reason we're doing that is twofold. Why is the Regional Council in there? So you'll see in the paper there's a diagram showing the urban waterways that are under control of the Regional Council as part of the Asset Management Group's operations. And then there's a whole bunch of the network which Napier also operates under its operations. And we have a joint consent for the discharge at the tidal gate into the estuary, and we both work on those consent conditions together. And so this is essentially gathering a lot of detailed operational data, so it's not required by the consent, but it's helping us understand what are the pollutants going into the urban waterways, where are they located. And so we wanted to basically get a record of that information and then utilise that information to look at both a capital improvement program and an operational improvements for the network. And I guess the novel part about this particular piece of work is we've taken the ownership question out. We haven't said the Regional Council operates this bit and Napier operates this bit. We've said we don't actually care who's operating what. We want to look at the system as a whole, understand what the improvements can be, and then those will sheet home to the responsible organisation after we've had that discussion. So once, I guess where we're at, we've collected about a year's worth of data, and that this will be presented in a bit more detail shortly. From there, we'll get some expert consultants on board to help work through what are the issues we can deal with at the source, what issues can be dealt with through a regulatory approach, and what issues should be dealt with a bit of a mop-up prior to discharge. And then we can discuss those plans and put the funding for those plans if required, or amend the funding, the placeholder funding that we have in LTPs and annual plan through that process and execute the work. And that'll give us a high level of confidence that the work that we are doing will be both effective in its ability to deal with the pollutants and also efficient in terms of we're getting some good bang for buck with the interventions that are undertaken. So I won't go through too much more detail, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, but I'm sure keen to get to what do the results say. Certainly the headline is they say we have a lot of work to do, but I'll hand over to John and Hannah to take us through the detail.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing us to perhaps come forward in the agenda. Much appreciated. So Hannah and I will take you through our presentation, and I just want to reiterate the point that this is very much a collaborative piece of work, looking forward with the intention of improving our stormwater quality performance across Napier. And there's obviously been some media interest in this, and I think a really key part of that media coverage is highlighting that we, as members in our community, all have a responsibility with regard to the problems that we face. So I see that as quite a good education piece out there in our community. So we'll launch into our presentation, and Hannah and I will share this. Probably Hannah's going to speak most, but if we could just flick to the next page. So for Napier City Council, a big driver for this work was our Ahuriri Estuary and Coastal Edge Master Plan, which sets the strategic vision for Council to improve our ecological performance with regard to stormwater quality discharge to the estuary. So that hopefully you've all seen that and understand there's a number of projects in there that relate to stormwater quality. So this is a big piece of work to inform how we might progress those projects with specific detail. Just drawing on a point that Chris made, this is about informing solutions. We see our open waterway network as an opportunity for a whole of waterway approach to treatment, and ideally we eliminate at source, and there'll be some contaminants that we may be able to do that with, but our whole waterway presents an opportunity for treatment. If we left it to a single wetland at the bottom end of that waterway, it probably won't be as successful as it could be. So as we take you through the presentation, hopefully we'll be able to present around that. So our stormwater study is a pretty comprehensive study. We're sampling 20 odd sites across the city on a frequency basis, and also post rainfall or during rainfall event, to understand what our dry weather flow contaminants are in comparison to wet weather, to paint a bit of a picture around how that might change depending on rainfall, and it also has a seasonal approach to it as well. As mentioned, all about collecting information and informing decision making as we move forward.
I'll just jump in. The key part of this program, particularly in the first year, is that we, as everyone around this table knows, we had a bit of a drought, a little bit over the last year. It's been quite difficult to collect stormwater samples as such, and this project, in light of that, has largely focused on dry weather monitoring, which is a bit strange when you think about stormwater, but in terms of the urban waterways, the dry weather flow is the majority of the flow that is affecting the Ahuriri Estuary on any given day due to the lack of stormwater in Napier City. So it's really been about profiling that dry weather flow, and that's quite a new step for either council in terms of a consistent monitoring program that covers multiple seasons and multiple years, actually profiling what those contaminants are during dry weather. So running through, I've got a bit of a catchment map here. The primary areas of focus are the West Shore tidal gates and the Taipo catchments, and those are those 6 major waterways that come together and combine or discharge in 3 different spots in the Ahuriri Estuary. So as I've just mentioned, neither council, HBRC nor NCC had consistent dry weather flow and wet weather flow monitoring across multiple seasons, and neither council had that across the city. So across the board, we had a lot of monitoring points based on resource consents that Chris has mentioned, and those were largely at the end of catchment. So this has been focused on trying to gather information on multiple sites, treating them as individual sites in themselves. So John mentioned before, we had 21 monitoring sites monitored each month in year 1. We're now into year 2, and we've dropped that to 20, and we've dropped the monitoring frequency to 6 weeks, and that's a bit more of a fingers crossed kind of thing to try and get more wet weather events. But as everyone knows, it's been a bit difficult trying to get rainfall in Napier City itself, so we're crossing fingers we can pick up more of those wet weather events and actually profile particularly the heavy metals coming off the industrial and urban areas.
You just got it all at once in November.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all during one day.
We were reasonably inundated at that point.
Busy with other stuff.
So the key concerns that we've picked up on, particularly in the water quality monitoring, phosphorus is our number one key concern, I suppose, and that is because there's a universal excessiveness, if that's a word, in phosphorus across Napier City, and that has previously been picked up before in Ahuriri Estuary alone, but it has now been found across every sample, every site, every waterway, and it's really surprised us. So that is something to be looking into, particularly with the uplift of historic marine soils. That could be an issue there that we need to manage down the line. Suspended sediment is also an issue in clarity. Suspended sediment in particular is a problem, obviously, for the estuarine receiving environment, particularly when it's really fine, heads out into the estuary, and if the flow is not enough, it can settle out and cause benthic smother. But not only that, along the way, if it picks up heavy metals in the water, they can attach to those sediments and negatively affect the sediment quality in the estuary as well. Ammonium nitrate, that's pretty universal, and nitrate in particular, so obviously we have issues with nutrients in the waterways. Zinc, that's pretty common contaminant in urban areas across New Zealand and the world. No surprises having picked up a lot of zinc in our waterways. Channelization, and I'm just going to add to that, riparian margins. There aren't many buffers for surface water to, I suppose, settle out before it actually discharges into the waterways. And that channelization has been historic for Napier City. Obviously, trying to move water out of the city has been the focus, but now we need to come back and reassess whether channelization is the right way to go for surface water quality. And then we've got fecal coliforms, pest plants within the waterways themselves, and standard rubbish. A big one on the bottom of that list is tubeworm. You may have heard Anna Madaras Smith talking about it in the estuary. It's actually started to creep up the county waterway, so that's something that's quite new for New Zealand, and yeah, it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on and figure out. So just running through these are some maps on the first year of monitoring, and these have been taken from the 12 monitoring rounds that we undertook. This is just presenting averages, so they include wet weather events as well that we did manage to gather. So total phosphorus, you can see there it's pretty universal across Napier, as I mentioned. Just keep an eye on the. Have you got a pointer? I can point it out.
Yeah.
This one here, see it come up soon. It's called Harold Holt County site, and that is a particularly bad site for nearly everything we've found. A bit of a surprise, but yeah, we'll just keep an eye on it as we go through these. Suspended sediment, again, issues largely across Napier. The top of the Piramu catchment, you can see that one yellow one down there. That's probably our one good news site in terms of sediment. Nitrogen, again, universal excess. Total zinc. This is where we've picked up a little bit of an anomaly along Saltwater Creek, which we call it Saltwater Creek. There's probably different names and labelling, but it runs alongside Park Island sort of starts close to Anderson Park, runs alongside Park Island and then enters the Piramu. So we've got some zinc issues in there that we need to focus on that are a bit of a surprise. Sort of expect more zinc to be coming from industrial zones, where you can actually see that in focus in the centre there. And copper is also a bit of a surprise, purely because we would expect, again, that focused copper zone, I suppose, to be within industrial zones, but most of it is coming from the upper catchment. So they're just running through a few issues per, I suppose, catchment that actually discharges to the estuary. The old Tutakuri riverbed actually takes 3 waterways before it's discharged along the eastern side of the state highway into Ahuriri. Issues with clarity and rubbish. The sediment is particularly anoxic in sites along the waterway itself. Fecal coliform issues, and as I mentioned with copper in particular, the quality improves downstream largely with some of the contaminants. And I've mentioned that Harold Holt site in the county, and that the excess of nutrients, in particular in this waterway, has caused a lot of algae in summer. We get a lot of service requests about that as well, so no surprises there. And the sediment within that catchment, all sites in the county waterway exceed the zinc guidelines, so there's something that we need to be planning for in terms of sediment quality along waterways, whether that's something we need to look to remediate in particular. I just want to mention there's one site in the Plantation Waterway that had very high lead and mercury levels. Mercury is obviously pretty toxic, that's the word. So is lead actually, so yeah, just a few management issues we need to be looking at there.
That was the Roman Empire, was the last one.
In terms of the Piramu catchment, I've mentioned the Saltwater Creek zinc anomaly. That's a bit strange, so we'll certainly be keeping an eye on that. Waverley Waterway is one that runs through Awatoto, and again, issues with stagnation and rubbish and suspended solids, and of course phosphorus. That zinc issue also extends to the sediment within the Saltwater Creek waterway, and the Piramu waterway is also experiencing issues with zinc in that as well. The
Bird's
sediment.
still got its legs.
What's that? Sorry.
I said that the bird's still got its legs.
Looks like it's upright. Looks pretty good to me.
What's the best one?
The Taipo catchment is the one that runs alongside Taradale there, so separate to Onikawa Industrial Zone. We still have zinc exceedances, which is interesting, particularly when it's 3 times over the guideline values for some of the sediment. Again, issues with clarity and suspended solids and fecal coliforms. So this sort of provides a bit of a summary. The red text shows that it's exceeding the guideline values for 90% species protection. There's a lot of red text on that graph. And the red fill is sort of the higher concentration. So the green probably is a little bit misleading, but it's stacked so that the red is the worst along that column, I suppose. And again, the county waterway is showing as by far the worst in terms of those 5 analytes. So what we've learned from the data so far is that the excessive amount of nutrients means that ecological enhancement options are possible, particularly in upper catchments where the water flow is slower. We do have issues with metal concentrations and suspended solids, so that indicates a potentially entirely different treatment and management system. And that comes from, well, as far as we've seen, there are issues in the roading catchments and the industrial catchments for those. And Saltwater Creek and zinc, I've mentioned. The universal phosphorus and ammonia and nitrogen excess as well. As Chris mentioned, we've got the next steps being a project review from an external consultant and starting to look into these treatment options if they're feasible.
So part of that external consultants review will be to look at the contaminants and what groups of them can be treated together, or what mechanisms might be available to remove some of those contaminants. As you've seen, we've got some challenges in that space, and it may be that we need to undertake more sampling or gather more data to inform detail around solutions to treat or remove or what have you. So that's what we expect to get out of that next step, engaging with some external experts around that. And ideally that'll inform where we might install treatment or removal devices across our whole network from top to bottom.
Yeah, so that's really it. It's really an information sharing exercise to let everyone know where we're at. I think everyone knew that the urban water quality was not good, but this gives us specific information around what the stresses are and specific locations, and it will be a big piece of work to come up with that comprehensive program. I guess it's also worth mentioning that while the team has been out there, they have observed a whole lot of pipes that we weren't aware of necessarily going into the network, and those sorts of things are being followed up as they've been detected. So really positive to have the team, out there having a really detailed look at that asset. So happy with.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you both for coming to present, and also the collaborative relationship based on values to get the problem solved together, opposed to having to divide. So, but they're also very alarming toxic results. So I'm looking forward to this review. And any questions for committee members? We'll start with Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, firstly, two main questions. Firstly, the phosphorus scenario. Did I understand you to suggest that might be an artefact of something that's in the ground, a historic sort of seabed issue, rather than human source?
Yeah, talking to Anna Madaras as well, she is at a bit of a loss in terms of the levels of phosphorus. Just like I mentioned, there's 500 times exceedance in one of the sites, in one of the samples. So that is what we're investigating, it being marine uplift from the soils.
Right.
Yeah, at a bit of a loss, unfortunately.
My second question is just the other one is, what is it that a polishing wetland at the end of the system downstream can't handle that would have to be handled upstream? Because I mean, you're not going to get rid of zinc and copper until we stop driving cars with brakes in them. So what is it that we're going to have to do something differently about than a polishing wetland can deal with? What are the risks to the polishing wetland? You know, what are we going to have to focus on upstream, etc., and possibly deal with downstream?
So certainly, Councillor, where we're in close proximity to roads and things like that, we can put local solutions in to capture a lot of those metals. And also understanding whether it's actually in the sediment, things like zinc, is that currently coming in off buildings? We know that you can't put new zinc roofing and things like that up. And it's also understanding the toxicity of some of these elements to a downstream wetland. So really, I guess the strategy is to eliminate anything coming in first. It's then if we can deal with it at source, it's generally a lot cheaper and easier to deal with the contaminant at source. So particularly around roading infrastructure, we can capture and treat that stormwater, and it comes with a cost and complexity, and we need to understand the operating costs that will impact. And then finally, a downstream wetland will deal with what can't be dealt with along the way. So I think if nothing else, it's just a comprehensive review of what all the options are. So whatever the recommended pathway is, we actually have confidence, A, it will work, and B, it's the most cost-effective solution that we can implement.
So that would, just to follow up on that involve an element of retrofitting existing roads and looking at the costs and benefits of that and the effectiveness as opposed to downstream.
Yep.
Yep. And then, will a wetland handle copper and zinc?
So that's something I can hand over to John, but we need some expert advice on those sorts of issues.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think, Councillor Williams, that's an excellent question, and that's one of the questions that the study is intending to answer. So, to be frank, we don't have those answers yet. We're partway through the study. Absolutely, we need to know. As you've pointed out, it's a polishing wetland, which would indicate that it's not going to do everything. And if we leave it to a terminal wetland prior to discharge to do everything, first flush, it's probably going to die. So at the end of the study, let's revisit that question, because I think it's absolutely on point.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and just firstly, I'd like to thank you for coming along, both Hannah and John. Great to see you here, and I hope we can see you more often.
Appreciate the invite.
Do this. Just a couple of questions about, if you like, direction of travel for your work or our combined work. I just firstly would ask, what level of engagement have we got with our science team in the construction of this whole approach to monitoring and information finding out around this? How does that work from your perspective?
Yes, so Councillor, I can provide some indication on that. Way back in the very beginning, we were determining how we would execute this project, and the Regional Council Science team were involved. What we worked out that is the Regional Council Science team were fully allocated to existing work that they were doing. They have had some oversight of the general planning of the plan, and Napier have had an environmental solutions team of reasonable size that were well placed to lead the work. So that's why the Regional Council's contribution has been financial, but there has been oversight from our science team.
Great to hear. If you don't mind, and just two more questions. Just looking at your approach to those particular, if you like, inputs, those that you've got there, I'm referencing a paper, 2009, Stream Ecological Valuation. Are you familiar with that work? MWH produced. So that's moving from your inputs to say what's the actual ecological effects going on in stream. Are you familiar with that work?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can answer that. Yes, we are, and we've worked with Dr. Sandy, you're going to have to forgive me, that's her name, to actually try and retrofit that to urban streams. The problem with that SEV assessment is that it's very, it's based on waterways that have a much higher ecological value than channelized concrete urban waterways.
Well, this is particularly for the Napier urban waterways, precisely the ones that you've overseen. So what I was hoping to see is some comparison between the 2009 data versus current data. So is there a scope to turn your current work into sort of finalising it in that format? Is that possible?
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely we can overlay our current work with that work. If I recall correctly, the MWH work in that report identified and prioritised challenges within each of our waterways and prioritised those for work. What the program that we're doing on now is explaining why the quality of those environments are what they are, so that we can be specific about how we might address those. So I think at the point where the MWH work came up with some priorities, we'll probably review those priorities to make sure that they're still relevant. But yeah, that's future steps. But
just
good point.
Finally, just one question. We did have, we introduced water into the plantation drain at one point, we're going back about 10 years now. Is that a solution to try and supplement those channel flows going forward? Is that something we can look into as a part of solutions?
So certainly, so some of that augmentation is still occurring, and it's something that we would look at with the broad range, and would also understand, I guess, the whether that's a beneficial use of our groundwater resource, basically to be feeding those drains. So that's something that's looked at, but it will need to be looked at with everything else. And that's why we want to compare the options, understand the pros and cons of the options, and have a high level of certainty that the options we've selected are the best options we have.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Just interesting, I don't see for the Tyne Street drain on the list there. Is that because the people are too afraid to go near it?
Through you, Madam Chair. We monitor the Tyne and the Thames waterways and their discharge to the Ahuriri Estuary at least once a month. So that is a separate program, but it does inform this as well.
So it's going to be part of this?
It's not directly part of this, no. It is a separate program. We are already spending money on it through our resource consent, so we didn't see the point in doubling up in data. We have that data.
Oh, so are we going to see the data for that as well?
Yeah. By all means, yeah. We provide that through our resource consent reporting, and we can present on that if you if you wish.
Well, just I had cause to go to somewhere, well, came across the Tyne Street drain, and I was afraid for my health, and I was only about 5 metres away from it. It's just,
Inside the fence line?
sorry?
You have a life jacket on?
sorry?
No.
Hardly any water in it.
Okay, we'll look into that, Councillor Barker.
Yeah, and
Is
look,
there another question?
I can just add is it was excluded from this piece of work that we're doing together because Napier have essentially 100% responsibility for that catchment, and there's a lot of work that's been done, but it is available.
Second thing is, it seems to me that what we're looking at here is doing the science to then do this, do that, to then look at taking some action later. Aren't there some obvious things we could be doing now without all the necessary paperwork? For example, buildings with zinc roofing. Shouldn't we be suggesting to the owners that they paint them to stop the zinc getting into waterways to go? Aren't there some things we could do immediately to start to look intuitively, obviously have an effect on this? Couldn't we be doing those things?
So look, I think we could. Our approach to date has been to have a structured, evidence-based approach so that we have a high level of certainty that what we're doing will work and it's efficient and effective with the funding that we have. I guess we don't necessarily want to pick a winner or run off doing certain things if we don't fully understand the impact that's having, whether it's a current impact, and then how effective it is to all the other options. So that's the approach I guess we're wanting to convey, that it's evidence-based, that it's structured, and as we move through the steps, we'll end up with a program of work that we have a high level of confidence we can afford, we understand the operational cost impact, and we have a high certainty that it will be effective.
Thank you. Councillor, would you like to respond?
Through you,
Yep.
Madam Chair, if we could just go back to your first question, Councillor Barker, with regard to the Thames Tyne. We are doing quite a bit of work in that space, and I wonder if this is a good opportunity for Hannah to describe some of the core sampling we've done there and the process around that and the results that's telling us, because you do have a good point in terms of it is a reasonably urbanised waterway that is in a state of degradation, and we do have funding there to do something about that.
Yeah, can we leave that to another date?
Yep, if would you like us to report back on that one as well, we can do that, and that might answer some of your questions.
And last questioner, Councillor Van Beek.
Okay, yeah. So once again, one of the culprits, of course, is vehicles, cars, buses, trucks, and all those. So in Europe, what they do is actually they remove a large area of parking and roading, and they actually then make those spaces open spaces where they actually have active. I've walked over places where there's actually huge reservoirs I walk over. So they're natural as well. They have plants growing out of them. And so they actually retain a lot of water in their water space, and they're almost like semi-wetlands. A stream doesn't start just when you can see it in a channel. It starts as soon as it actually hits something, and so and I think that has got a lot of benefits, not only just water quality. It's got a lot of, and don't get me started. You know my hobby horse.
A very short question from Councillor Foley.
Oh, just a bit of a scientific question, so it might be Ian or Katrina, if she's listening. The nitrogen figures, how do they relate to the ones we use in the Tuki plan change? Are they the same, like for like?
Oh, I don't recall what the figures are. Is it DIN or is it nitrate?
Nitrate.
Just in that table you've got, yeah.
I suspect they're probably well in excess of the limit that's in the Tuki. So it's TN total nitrogen, which isn't the same. It's a different nitrogen species. So they're not comparable. Dissolved inorganic nitrogen is what we would measure in the Tuki. That's total nitrogen, which is nitrate, nitrite, and ammonia all combined. So it's a different measure.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll move that we receive the report.
Thank you. And a seconder. Okay, would you like to speak?
I do wish to speak. Thank you very much for the report. We're on a seriously long journey. But I think everyone around here, and I think the people of Napier and the people of Hawke's Bay, really appreciate the work you've done into this report and appreciate your honesty, because there's no doubt about it, we have it honestly served up to us today, and I think everyone was a little bit of shock, although we were suspecting. So this is a long journey, but it's clear that you're on it, and if we can partner with you, we really appreciate that opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
Just very briefly, I want to congratulate the Napier City Council's investment in this area and John and co, Hannah, for driving this through. This is really good news from Napier City's perspective, taking an active engagement in understanding what's at stake here. It's interesting, and I'm really keen on the evidence coming through, because I think we need to realise that sitting amongst all this is the need to understand where some of these contaminants are coming from. Are they natural baseline material that we need to acknowledge as something we have to live with? And that'll drive what exactly we can do about it. And you're already showing some of the evidence around that. So I think we need to really continue to dive into this, excuse the pun, and work out what solutions are practical and what's because we have got a highly modified. These are not natural watercourses; they're highly modified. We've put them there, and only in recent times. So what are we responsible for? What are we not responsible for? So look forward to your next iteration sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
Just like to make a comment, an observation. If this was a farming report, we would have some real serious outcry from this table. Now, thank you very much. It doesn't look good. We're going to work on it. To me, it's not fair. When this was if this would have been a farming report from the Tuki, we would have some serious outcry around this table. Okay, this is very serious. This is urban streets that are making a lot of mess. And people in urban areas are doing it. Our councillors around the table are quite measured in their approach. I'd just like to make that point.
Very fair point. Any other speakers? Right of reply? Okay, all those who agree to receive this report say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll look forward to seeing you again.
Look forward to your report on Tyne Street. All right.
Good point. Thank you. If we can welcome then, going back to the schedule, item 8, the proposed environmental projects overview tool. Thank you for your patience.
So, Chair, through you, just while Jolene and Lee are setting up, I think you've met Jolene before. She works for me and my team as a principal advisor, and Lee is in the GIS team and council. For quite a while now, Councillor Barker's left, but he was one of the drivers, and Chair, you were as well. You've been asking for a bit of a view of some of our work in a more comprehensive way. Well, not some of our work, all of our work in a more comprehensive way. Can we paint you a picture? And so we've been really struggling to pull together what we think is a suitable tool. I personally love maps. I think, Chair, you're the same. Councillor Barker was the same. So we've been working on a map view, a spatial view of our projects to start to give you a sense of scale in coverage and types of work we've got happening across the region. This is a draft tool the team is still working on. They're keen to quickly run you through it, get your feedback so we can continue the development and make refinements. So I'll hand over.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. So this is a demonstration of a proof of concept. So just want to outlay that some of the data still needs a bit of quality checking, but we just want to show you where we're at to date, get a sense from you if it meets your needs. Also want to state it's just a snapshot on time. So we've gathered the data from this year's annual plan, so it's not a ongoing live update of data. So what we've done is try to keep it really simple. We categorise the data that we have of our on-ground activities. So obviously in council we do a lot more than this. So we've highlighted more than 70 activities that we could put into this tool. For this demonstration we've got 18. We've created categories not by group, team in the organisation, but by what we do. So we've created protecting our biodiversity, controlling our pests, managing our catchments, open space and recreation, river and waterway management, and environmental monitoring and analysis. So how it works is, first up on the landing page, you can see all of our on-ground activities. So it's showing all 18 on the side there. So Lee, you to categorise controlling our pests. And so it filters out only those activities that come under that category. On the map you can see here Lee's clicked on feral goats. In the centre there we've got the category controlling our pest, and then you can click on each of those activities. Rooks, the summary just highlights the purpose of this activity, and then if it's in the annual budget, OPEX or CAPEX. So if you can go to another one, just to show. So environmental monitoring and analysis, air quality monitoring. There's the information about this activity, and you can see on the map where this activity is happening. So some programs of work will identify sites across the region where we want to be working, but actually we're only showing what that budget relates to in this financial year, so where we're actually spending the money. We've also included catchment, so if you wanted to view by catchment the on-ground work activities we're working on, you can select that. Catchment and also subcatchment. It's work in progress at the moment. It is a big task because not all the data sits in one location, not all the data is consistent. So it did take time working with staff to pull this together. Hence why it's a snapshot rather than a live tool, which shows you the progress. So that's actually our strategy and governance team are working on a tool, a dashboard to provide that, and that will be our quarterly operational reporting updates, where this is an annual snapshot, what's happening on the ground where. You're really keen to hear your feedback.
Any feedback?
It's really good.
Where do we find it?
So the intention will be much like the organisational performance dashboard reporting that we've been providing under Power BI would be provide you with a link, and then you can interrogate it at your will. So you can.
That could be hooked into our Stella system, so that's one of the resources we could just. Do we need to?
Stella's a document management system,
Right,
so
it's not
probably the
gonna
answer is
work.
no. Yeah, it's better to sit alongside it.
Is this the way, this is really great. I'm interested to see where you'd like it to be in 3-4 years' time, because it's that annual operational snapshot, and then it flags any new CapEx, not operational X. So I imagine as you just build up history, different tabs will be there, you'll see some trends. And the second question is this where we will start to see some of the environmental metrics be able to come up through the organisational type reports that you just mentioned there, James? This vehicle will start to see some of those trends? Is that the origins? Was that the starting point for that? Can we use it for that?
So, look, good question. Hadn't necessarily envisaged that it would start to be a place where we would do our domain reporting and our state of the environment type reporting. That's possible. Wasn't designed particularly with that in mind. This is really about activity and investment at place. It doesn't go to outcomes at this point, not to say it couldn't. It's taken a little while to build it to this point. It's, as Jolene said, it's manually populated at the moment in time. We'd like to have it live as we develop our system, so it can be at any point in time you can check on it. That may present the opportunity to bring in monitoring data as well, but that's not within the initial scope.
Well, it's a fantastic initiative because I think it's one of the first times where people from Hawke's Bay can look at their environmental agency and see the stuff we're doing in the environment in one-stop shop. It's a great initiative, and look forward to how it evolves.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, look, everything Councillor Foss said. As a councillor who is equally and equitably concerned about rural and urban environmental issues, could you please just click for my illustration purposes on farm environmental management plans? So what's that telling me? One for everywhere? There's no gap?
So we do have a separate GIS layer, which isn't currently embedded in this, which does show us which farms have an environment management plan and which don't, and obviously it's pretty comprehensive.
Oh, so that's just where they should be.
Well, that's the aggregate of the whole catchment. So what we haven't done is integrate that other layer into this one yet.
Because we could, and we had this discussion actually in the development of this. The previous version had a series of points for the properties where a plan applied. Effectively, you just had a big purple blob. So that's a polygon that says, well, in this area, we're busy doing farm planning. And then in time, you'll see more of those polygons appear across the region.
Thank you.
Can we type in Councillor Williams' address?
And see if he's got a farming plan.
Just see if he's got a temple, whatever it is.
You could have one for my vegetable garden if you wish. There's not a lot of anything but compost that goes into that.
I think it's a fantastic tool. Thank you for building it for us, and we'll progress with that. If there's no other feedback for now, but it being user-friendly, it stops us asking our management nitty-gritty questions. I think it will help as well. So thank you for that. Any other feedback? Because Councillor Barker, we're out of the room. This is the start of the dashboard.
Good. I like
Yep.
it.
You asked for apparently.
You asked for it.
I like it. I think it's great. Yeah. No, we should say that. It's exactly what we want.
Fantastic. If there's no other feedback for now, I think we can accept your presentation.
We'll have to sort out something with time and rate.
Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Councillor Barker will
I'll move it.
Councillor Fanbake was there first, and then you can second it, Councillor Barker. Would you like to speak?
I'll leave that to Councillor Barker.
We can move on.
Any other speakers?
Thank you.
All that agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Next on the agenda, we have the Erosion Control Scheme
Cool. Thank you.
update. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. So look, I'll invite Dean and Billy to the table. You've met Dean before, familiar with his role as Manager Catchment Delivery. Billy, you've probably not met before. Billy's been promoted within the organisation to from a catchment advisor to a catchment lead. So she's working closely with Dean on particularly the erosion control scheme delivery performance monitoring based here in Napier. And look, they're going to run you through quickly key points to the paper, but really this is just a follow-up from the session we had with you at the end of last year where we said, hey, look, the scheme's wildly successful and we need more money, please. And you said, great, here it is, which was excellent. In the meantime, we acknowledged that at that point we didn't have all of the tools we needed working to the level we needed to accurately kind of manage and monitor the performance of the scheme. There's been a lot of work happen in that space that they'll quickly talk about, as well as a lot more to happen in the future. So a bit of a sense of that, and then a bit of a sense of where we're at in terms of uptake as of today. So I'll hand over to Dean and Billy.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Ian. So as Ian said, this is a follow-up to the previous committee meeting in February. So what we've tried to do here is to highlight the things that have been taking place in the background to ensure we're in control of the forecasts and budgets for this program of work. And I'll go through the key points that hopefully you took from the paper. So Billy and her key team of staff have been working hard in terms of trying to get the information from our CRM system into a financial tracker, and this is the tool that we are currently using to track budgets and for forecast the work that's coming up. So really good news that we finally have a tool that does that, and it's had a lot of interpretation and trying to interrogate the system to give us where we've ended up, and it's been really positive in terms of where we've landed with that, and also in terms of the fact that we've got a tool that can actually show us that now. And I guess the consequence of that is that the commitments for this year and the forecasts for next year are looking really positive, and that we are working within budgets for that. So that's a really positive result, and it's great to be able to see that clearly. We've also spoken last committee meeting around adjusting the grant rate, given the uptake of the scheme, and we've looked to move that from 75 to 50% as of 1 July. We're also looking to introduce a funding cap to ensure that we can spread, I guess, the love of the fund around the region and ensure that as many properties as possible can get involved with the scheme and have access to funding. There was a reasonable amount of large properties involved in the scheme in the early stages, and they were making full use of the funding. So we've basically introducing a cap so that they still have access to that to do priority work, but we're spreading the funding out to other landowners as well. I guess the other key point there is around the system changes that are underway and have been identified as critical in terms of system changes that are required to ensure that going forward we have access to all the information we need and we don't have to rely on a spreadsheet, which is the financial tracker that we're currently using, and that we have a system that does that job for us automatically and it isn't manually intensive work. And I guess a follow-on from that is we're currently starting to have conversations with other councils who obviously do similar type of work. They use a wide range of different systems and processes to manage that. Just about all councils do it differently, so there is no one way to do it. It's just a case of having discussions, viewing what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why, how comprehensive they are. How do we use those tools potentially to report on what we need to report on, and then see if we can introduce any of those things into what we're currently doing. Staff have spent quite a bit of time with our IT team regarding what system changes can take place with CRM and GIS. Some of those changes have now been, I guess, quoted in terms of what we can and can't do and the priority for those. So some of those changes are underway, and that will give us a better snapshot of actually what was told deliver in the long term.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to add to that, the key point from this work is that essentially as a council we've got a responsibility to continuously improve the way the systems and processes which are the foundation for delivering quality work. So we've identified issues with our financial management system. We've got an interim system to provide clarity until that change is made to our initial system. Alongside that, the other systems and processes which report on our key metrics for basically what we achieve on the land and maintaining soil and improving water quality through our erosion control scheme. Our ability to capture the outcomes of that work is critical to showing what we are achieving in the landscape.
So you would have seen in the paper that there was some numbers presented to you. Since then we've updated that sheet. I guess the crux of what you've got on screen here is for the current year, what that's showing you is that there's about $87,000 that we're in the black for this year. So that's in terms of all the projects that were committed for this year, in terms of the funding that you approved earlier in February. What it's also showing is that in the 2021 financial year, the forecast is showing that we've committed around $1.1 million of projects already, and there's around $2 million worth just sitting there waiting to be approved. So what that basically means is that there's a prioritisation process that will need to take place with those projects that are sitting there that effectively are more than the budget allows currently. I guess the key take-home message for councillors today is basically that the staff and myself as the accountable manager for this program, that we're confident in terms of what the numbers are telling us, and it ensures that we are managing the budgets and forecast to approve budgets. So thank you.
Thank you, Billy and Dean. Do we have any questions for either of them? Councillor Foley.
Oh, just whether those key changes, have you had many conversations with landowners around the drop in subsidy and the cap, and what sort of responses are you getting?
Through you, Madam We have surveyed landowners with the strategy to reduce the grant rate from 75 to 50%. In the initial implementation of the erosion control scheme, the 75% grant rate was chosen because it provided fast uptake of the scheme, and for the knowledge of the scheme's place and support from council was communicated and spread across the region. The uptake is obviously now more than what our budget can supply. So the option to reduce to a 50% grant rate, we have surveyed landowners, 60% of landowners were comfortable with the reduction to a 50% and felt that 50% was still supportive enough to allow changes on farm to take steps to protect soils and water. I feel that 50% is in line with what other councils around the country are supporting. So I'm confident that although there are a small group of people that possibly felt unhappy with the change, that it is still adequate for us to be able to target our support and promote change.
Thanks, Billy. I guess just to follow that up, there was only, I think, out of 54 landowners that were surveyed, there was only one that said they wouldn't continue with the work, and 67 said they were happy with that and they would carry on as they were doing. There was a number that obviously the remainder that were, oh, if you're going to change it from 75 to 50, we're not that happy with that, but obviously we want to do the work, so we're going to carry on anyway. And they may have made some adjustments around the amount per year that they're doing, but they still intend to do it. But they'll just change the frequency and how often they do it.
Councillor Foss.
Thanks very much. Great to have the numbers and that transparency that you've got there. Really appreciated. Is it? How long has the kind of variations of the scheme been going? How long have we been helping subsidise planting trees and?
So there was the previous regional land care scheme that was developed in. Oh look, I can't remember exactly the date. I think it was in the 90s. Soon after the council was formed, and I suspect in Catchment days was probably similar schemes.
Good few years. Yeah. Thanks. So, are we able to see any results just below where we've invested in planting on some of these, sediment-laden hillsides? Do we sample any of those sites? Because I'm sure the results are good, but I've actually I only get the negative side as well. We should be doing this. It'd be great to see somehow some of the positive results just below it. Is that easy to do or hard to do?
Yes, look, I think it has come to you previously, but we'll perhaps bring that back to you to give you visibility of it.
There was a small example in Right Tree, Right Place ages ago, but it'd be good to see a bit more. Sure.
So we do have a program of monitoring across the whole region using a tool called an ISCO, which is a sampler that allows you to sample at the time sediment is moving, which is when it's raining. Not that happens very often here at the moment. But anyway, so the tool is designed for us to gauge an understanding of what our current sediment loads are coming out of catchments, and then in time start to tell a story about change.
Yeah, and look, it might be too small given, down the road, but just below where we've planted, there must be some positive results, I'm sure. We Skyed about.
So look, we don't specifically target at a particular site. These ISCOs are at catchment scale that we're doing the monitoring because they are very expensive and it takes a lot of energy and time to run them. So it's one of those things that we haven't looked at a very specific case. What has happened though is that you might be aware of the Sustainable Land Use Initiative called Estuary in the Horizons region. They set up post the 2004 floods that they had down there and have had monitoring across their Estuary catchments for some time now and have statistically significant improvements in both sediment reduction and faecal contamination in their catchments. So although we don't have specific evidence specifically for this region in this program, there is evidence from other parts of the country to say these programs work. We'll build our own evidence base in time. We don't have it right now. And then the last thing to say would be that we know from things like the Pikaratahi paired catchment study that was done in this region I can't tell you exactly when, but some time ago, that these sorts of management interventions will have real benefit on water quality outcomes and sediment loads in these catchments.
Okay, because we're putting this 100k cap on, it does imply, you said some very large holdings have been utilising this to, I guess, significantly more, which must be a reasonable stretch of stream or river. So right there could well be an interesting example of positive improvement in settlement to help, you know, we've got about 3 programs in this space, and be really interested to see that if it's available.
Through you, Madam Chair, an opportunity that we will be investigating further is photo points of properties where an erosion control plan has been implemented with permission, the neighbouring property. So essentially, where we can implement these works, it gives resilience to storms. Where there is spaced, for example, willow and poplar planting on a farm with an adjacent farm that is not planted, you can see after major storm events instantly what the effects are. So it's the science monitoring is long term. It is hard to measure change through scientific monitoring of water quality, but we know that the outcomes are positive. Photo points could give us those snapshot images of what it's doing on farm.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just go back a few slides? There was something just up there. Yeah, just wanted to be clear that we hadn't previously approved as a council the 50% reduction that had been put to us as an option in the previous paper, and there's more about that here. The recommendation in the paper is just to receive the report. Do you need more from us and a more specific decision from us, and if so, is it that this committee or is it the council? What's the procedure there?
No, so the current ECS grant policy that council previously approved allows that flexibility in the grant rate. So we're giving you the visibility of the change we're proposing, and welcome to take a contra view that's not the right thing to do and review that. But I think, as you've heard from the team prior to us saying, look, let's change this, we're going to talk with our clients, and they've said, by and large, no
Just
problem.
wanted to check you were getting from us what you needed to do what you recommended.
On that, I'd like to move the recommended motion, and thank you both actually for your mahi and asking the people on the ground how this affects them. Do I have a seconder to receive this report? Councillor Foley, would you like to speak, Councillor Foley?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'd just like to endorse the changes you're proposing there. There's ever increasing demand from landowners to plant trees. We've seen that out there, whether it be just increased or creation of new biodiversity, wetlands and erosion control, hence the success of the scheme. But there is some concern or debate around the level of subsidisation to farmers, and as we know, with the increasing demand, there's only a limited pool of funds. So I think any changes to increase fairness and spread the benefits across more landowners has to be endorsed. So well done, and long may it continue. Thank you.
Thank you. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you. Thank you both.
Madam Chair, can you make available to all our councillors T-shirts that have got protect to plant to protect on it, so when we go on field days we can, it's a really good thing to do.
In order.
Come and work in our team.
I thought I already did. We're part of the team, aren't we?
Councillor Van Beek wants a cheap T-shirt.
A cheap one, a free one.
Free one.
What's your order?
Subsidised. No, it's only subsidised 50%.
Bring your hat back and we'll put
No
it
problem.
Thank you. Now on to our next item. We have item 11, update on the IRG Flood Control Resilience Fund projects. Thank you. Do we have David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll introduce David and Martina supporting. Yes, come up, Martina. So David heads up our regional projects team. So he's really winding up or getting the machine going for the capital delivery of that huge IRG program. And we've taken on a number of staff recently to improve our delivery capacity. And Martina's here obviously heads up our regional assets team. So Martina's responsible really for scoping the project, developing at what point the project should be delivered, and then the projects are handed to David's team to focus on the capital delivery. So we've got a paper there outlining our 4 projects. They're all at quite different points in their project life cycle. And so David's just going to, I guess, point out some key aspects of each project, and then we're happy to answer any questions. And we've also got a bunch of photos and things just demonstrating progress.
Thank you.
So thanks, David.
Good afternoon. Just kick off by just reiterating that this is just an update on the flood control resilience funded projects from Infrastructure Reference Group through the Provincial Development Unit. I guess we'll kick off on a positive note in that our response from the IRG and PDU to date has been extremely positive. So much so that we've been asked to help support some of our neighbouring regional councils to assist them with not only their reporting but also part of their programme project planning as well. As this is quite a fast-paced project, there are some that have been left behind in the dust, unfortunately, but it's positive to know that we are, along with Otago Regional Council, are leading the way. So that's a really positive bit of feedback from the IRG.
And we're charging for our
we actually have a separate budget that's been provided by IRG to support that function as well. So good question. Yeah. So not to take away from that, I guess the key thing to understand as part of these projects, or part of this delivery package, is not only the physical works and the engineering portion of works that we're assisting with delivery on, but there's a far more important component that accompanies that. That as an engineer, it's often very easy to overlook, and that's the kind of softer deliverables around social procurement outcomes, supplier diversity, environmental outcomes, and the like. So as we move forward with these packages of work, we're slowly becoming more mature in our approach and how we can deliver as a whole package all of the required outcomes, and we'll touch on that in a bit more detail as we go through. So our big project, Project 1, I'm just going to talk to the paper, and I'll put some slides up at the back here, and we'll bounce backwards and forwards. So Project 1, I guess one of the significant movements that we've had in the last couple of months on this particular project is the development of a professional services panel for engineering consultants. So as part of our procurement policy, we're required to go through a detailed procurement methodology for engaging a number of different parties to help us deliver these projects. So this panel agreement for engineering services will cover quite a broad spectrum of deliverables, from geotechnical engineering, design, civil design, structural design, river engineering, flood modelling, for support to our existing services that we provide in-house. So we're in the throes of request for proposal for that just now, which is we've yielded quite a good positive outcome as part of that process through an expression of interest. That's going to help us sort of streamline our procurement efficiencies through these projects, which is extremely important given the somewhat optimistic timeframes that we've been challenged with. So with regards to the actual projects themselves, we've over the last few months we've summarised 39 key sites, and these are shown up on the screen here. I believe that's also in one of the appendices to the paper. Each of these sites are prioritised through modelling outputs and freeboard requirements, as well as consequences of failure, flood breach scenarios, condition assessments, and then importantly investigation outputs. To date, we've done some geotechnical and geophysical investigations on Taradale Stopbank, and the results of that have been extremely interesting. We've drilled down into a bit more detail around some of the results there to help us move forward with a number of options for strengthening that particular stopbank. Another part of the key works, I guess, that I discussed at the beginning is our collaborative site enhancement, biodiversity gains, and sort of integrating the hard engineering works with some really specific key biodiversity outcomes. So we've got quite a few People on board to assist us with that, to achieve some of our supplier diversity outcomes, utilising Maori Pacific Island businesses in particular, and being able to deliver these works with a suite of social procurement outcomes and environmental outcomes.
Question just before we go, that I see that there's pretty colours all through here. Pascal, what do the colours mean? I'm going to find the colour.
So the colours just identify each specific site, so that it's not
no meaning to them.
No.
So reds don't mean any different from the greens and the blues.
So the number is
Thank you.
in the middle, then it
Yep,
shows the
got it.
extents.
Food handles, okay.
Get worried about that. It's a colour number.
So some of the works that we've done include destructive testing, geotechnical testing, and some non-destructive testing. Up on the screen just now is an example of the geophysical testing that we've undertaken at Taradale as our pilot study, and how that information allows us to understand what the health of the stop bank, or what the type of material, how it's compacted, whether we've got any issues with piping or with other failure modes through the stop bank itself.
Or putting a car park on it.
Sorry?
Won't pick that up.
Yeah. So we've actually rolled out a programme for an additional 6 sites that have been noted in the paper here as well, and I believe they start later this week. We've had some comms out around some of our stop bank users to be aware that there will be some possible disruption to their business. So. Project 2, Upper Tuki Flood Control Scheme. This is the gravel extraction within the Upper Tuki scheme itself. Significant amount of work has been undertaken to date to arrive at what we have here on the screen is the availability of gravel shown on a heat map. Apologies about the how small the writing is. I guess the key thing here is anything in red that's shown on these 2 rivers, the Waipawa and the Upper Tuki, denotes aggradation of gravel, so availability of gravel to extract. Anything in blue denotes degradation, so anything that's below the design grade. Important to note that we did have a design grade level for these 2 rivers in the Upper Tuki scheme area, so this piece of work was done some time ago. For the remaining 3 rivers, the Tukipo, Akaretu and the Manganuku, we've undertaken quite a considerable piece of work to arrive at the design grade levels to establish availability for each of these different rivers. So acknowledging the amount of work that's been done by Regional Council's engineering team to achieve that in such a short time frame. I guess the outshot of this is it gives us a snapshot of what the availability of gravel is in this scheme itself. Somewhere in the region of 3.1 million cubic metres of gravel is available for extraction to achieve our design grade levels. So that's significantly greater than what we'd anticipated at the outset of this work. We were in the ballpark of about 800,000 cubic metres. We've undertaken a number of different aerial surveys to understand the existing levels and base them off our design grades to arrive at these volumes. To couple this, there is, as I think we may have discussed during our last update, the issue around Chilean needlegrass infestation, which, apologies, that's pretty poorly shown as a red outline just at the bottom of this map here.
Yep.
And this area itself accounts for almost half of the available gravel in the Upper Tuki scheme, some 1.4 million cubic metres of gravel. So we have a challenge on our hands on how best we manage and deal with this particular issue. We've gone out to a couple of consultants and we've had some pretty good feedback, and we're in a position where we would like to engage a consultant to undertake a study on this area for us and how best we can manage this. I guess the opportunity under the IRG funding to assist us with gravel extraction here will benefit outside of this scheme within the Heratonga Plains scheme and any other schemes where we have issues with Chilean needlegrass, so quite a positive output. As part of the works Shortly after Christmas, the works group established 3 new accesses to these areas. This particular map shows the gravel testing areas where we're taking samples and taking them away to laboratory and understanding their engineering properties, I guess, to further determine where the most valuable material might sit versus the least desirable material. I guess the most valuable material being that material that may be used for subbase for roading. We call it like a crust angular gap 65 material. And all these tests that we've listed here will provide us confidence that this material is available in these particular areas. So we couple that with our own prioritisation based on our own levels of service and with the aggregation of these gravels to arrive at the key areas where we find we put an importance level on particular areas or reaches that should be extracted in the short term, and then some of the areas that have got lower risk in the long term. In addition to this, there's been an independent economic study undertaken by a consultant that's been engaged to assist us with the collaborative framework, and we're in a bit of a holding pattern just now, working alongside the Director for Procurement for the 5 councils to understand what LTA demand there is that can satisfy the supply from this area. So we're trying to really link up these two, the supply and the demand, so that we can maximise our output in terms of removing this material and putting it to satisfy some of our social procurement outcomes in the contract. Most recently, we undertook consultation with Upper Tukey scheme ratepayers, which was last month, I think. And more importantly, the discussions through the long-term plan consultation and the decision, that we're awaiting at the end of this financial year to proceed with this particular project. By far and large, the most progress that we've had to date through this programme of works sits in the Upper Tukey Flood Control Scheme project at State Highway 50 on the Waipawa River, where we've carted some 70,000 cubic metres of gravel and installed 75 precast concrete ACMON units, over 3,000 lineal metres of rail irons and some 8,000 lineal metres of wire rope as part of our erosion protection works. We're in a position now where we've completed the lion's share of the physical works, the engineering works, and we're about to start preparation for a significant planting programme. Some 4,700 trees will be planted along the left and right bank of this project, far exceeding our biodiversity outcomes. And in terms of our ecological impact assessment that was undertaken by independent third party, we've far exceeded our net positive outcome as a result of this project, so we're very pleased with that. The image on the right here is an output from a 3D aerial survey drone unit, and this actually shows us the red areas where we need to remove material and the green areas where we need to grade material. So this has been extremely helpful in understanding the volumes of material that need to be removed and placed as part of this project. On the left, we have the red lines indicate our rope and rail groin arrangement, and the black lines on the left bank in the corner here show our ACMON units. So top left here, you can see that there's been some slotting already been undertaken, just to kind of show the vast scale of this project. From one end to the other, it's approximately 1.2 kilometres in length. On the right-hand side here, these white lines that's our 75 concrete precast ACMON units. And as part of the works, we've been undertaking drone surveys to monitor and provide a bit of feedback to the team on how the works have been progressing. So I'll just play this quickly, this video, if it will play. video. And this will kind of give us a bit of a sense of the scale of the project. Just the behaviour itself. So here we're starting at the, oh dear.
You need to upgrade to fibre, chorus.
Oh, is it going to behave? So here we're at the top end of the scheme. And I don't know what the pilot's been up to, but we're working our way downstream towards State Highway 50 bridge. On our right-hand side is the start of our rope and rail groins. These hadn't been completed by the time this video was done. The channel was, there was a channel that was excavated that was left until the work started excavating the channel from the bridge end, working its way up. And at the end of the excavation, the switchover of the river itself was put into the new channel. All of the gravel on either side of the channel, there were a number of minor braids that were coming off the main river. So yeah, this is quite a significant amount of earthworks that's been undertaken. Apologies for the...
Okay. Where's the voiceover?
There was some music actually. So on the left there, you can just see coming into view there the concrete Acmons side. So they've been buried as well. So they're actually partially buried in the gravel. And then within the active edge of the channel, all the way back to the banks will be some 4,700 trees, which will assist with the erosion.
What bridge is that?
State Highway 50.
Oh,
Oh no, we're going to fly under the bridge.
yeah.
So NZTA very kindly contributed 30% of the overall project value for this. Our contribution was limited to 6% for this particular project. So
that was purely to protect their asset.
I'll probably speak a little bit more to that, Martina.
There are two points to it. Yes, to protect the State Highway 50 approaches to the bridge, but the issue was that the erosion on this side was progressing further, and access, which is actually helping us to do maintenance, was pretty much would be lost. So it was for two. It was for protection of the bridge, and it was also to stop the erosion. And the issues with this side is that we have tried a little bit softer engineering, more planting and rope and rail, but for last 5 years it just wasn't successful. That's why we have to do a little bit more hard engineering and do the Acmons and specifically on that side.
So this is a great example where the IRG funding has allowed us to deliver a project that we had on the books. We knew there was a problem, but under the existing rating structure, we simply couldn't afford to deliver the project. So it has really allowed us, to accelerate and get things done that ordinarily we wouldn't be able to do.
You mentioned before that we think there's 3 million more cubic metres of material in these waterways than we thought. Where we thought there was probably 800 million cubic metres. So that's 2+ something million cubic metres. If that's over 2 million cubic metres of material in these waterways, more than we estimated, it must mean that we have less capacity to hold floods than we had before by 2 million cubic metres. So are we reassessing the capacity of these stop banks and schemes to cope with floods as a consequence of that?
So this particular scheme isn't on our priority list to review because we're looking at Napier, Miani, Karamu and Waterway areas. The last analysis we did about a year ago said that we were still delivering nameplate capacity because there's always a safety factor. We were still delivering nameplate capacity. In some of the tributaries, we didn't actually have a grade line to work to. So this project has allowed us to develop that grade line, which has given us better accuracy on those forecasts. So it doesn't necessarily all need to be taken out straight away. There are specific areas where it will need to be taken out, and so the team is working through that detail.
Well, just recast my questions more simply. If we've got more material in the river than we thought,
yep,
then our capacity to hold it must have been changed.
Yep.
And does that change our thinking on the ability of the stop banks to contain a major flood?
So not at this point, no. We're not concerned to the extent that we would need to review the entire scheme.
Brendan, do you still have your presentation to go, or was it the end of the...
One more project.
One more, yeah, white
Yes.
ore.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Oh, no, we don't want to do that again.
That's not wire ore.
Madam Chair, while David is looking for that,
Yeah.
can I just ask a follow-up to Councillor Barker's question? Because I thought that the $8 million that was subject of IRG funding and a targeted rate consultation was precisely to ensure that the scheme operated as intended.
Yep.
Not least, or in part, through the additional extraction of the $3 million that we're trying to get rid of.
Yep.
Part of which would be offset by encouraging more contractors to take it out. I mean, that's essentially what we're trying to do, is to get rid of the $3 million.
Right. Yeah. So the initial estimate was 800,000 cubic metres, which we knew were in specific areas. As we've had more investigation as to the size of the problem or the size of the availability of the material, there's 2.5 million cubic metres. But that doesn't necessarily mean that 2.5 million all needs to come out. We do need to take out approximately 1 million in the key areas to maintain our nameplate capacity.
And does the 8 million do, what's the 8 million going to do?
But it's effectively a subsidy to industry to make up for the differential cartage cost.
That's
from
what
the
it'll be
more
for.
local sources.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, project number 4, the Wairau River Parade Scour Protection Project. We've just put some images up here of the actual issue. I'm not too sure if everyone's familiar with this.
No.
The damage from the erosion on the left bank is attributed to a number of different things, and we've managed to work successfully with Wairau District Council in terms of protecting their assets, and more importantly with Wairau District Council to assist with relocation of one of their water mains as part of the enabling works of this project. So we talk about our geotechnical investigation and our preliminary designs have been complete for this. We've had design options for the proposed sheet pile wall, and the detailed design phase is due to kick off later this month. We are looking currently at a sheet piled wall with a number of anchor ties that pass below the River Parade Road. In order for us to facilitate that, the water main has to be relocated, back towards the pavement at the back end here. So currently in the top right, we see this is the existing water main that sits. The scale's a bit off on this image. This sits at the edge of the sealed road, and this was one of the key assets that was being compromised by this erosion. The designers have determined the type of water in terms of the salinity and also the type of soil to assist with the anticipated design life and the thickness of these sheet piles. So we've arrived at a point where we've got a preferred option, and our discussions in the region, I think we're due up there tomorrow to meet with some local tangata whenua to discuss this project in a bit more detail. We're looking at 73 lineal metres of sheet pile to the corner of the car park that sits in that shaded blue area there. So that was...
Oh, thank you. And congratulations to the team on the successes so far. There are so many that you pointed out, especially especially around the ecological enhancement practice methods that you're using. So congratulations. We just have short questions, please, if we have any. Councillor Foley.
Thanks for that report, guys. As you know, still early days, but starting to get quite a lot of queries around people that support this gravel extraction but don't want trucks and diggers working outside their back doors. So, I mean, are you, as part of the plan, a lot of consultation and knocking on doors, because, yeah, I can just sense this just growing to something that's going to get out of hand if we don't.
So the feedback from the consultation discussion through the LTP was specifically around keeping all of the specifically grade A ratepayers informed, and yeah, I think there's going to be a...
Yeah, I think we kind of know those problematic areas, and we probably know who to talk to a little bit more frequently. And so we are going to be undertaking quite shortly actually discussion on those problematic areas as a, you know, what are the concerns, can we mitigate them, how can we work with you? Because the fact is that we do have to do the extraction, there is the problem, and if we are not allowed to do it, then there is a problem. So we will try to work with them and find a solution which is going to somehow help. But yeah, we are aware of those problematic areas.
How do people expect it to be removed if there's not a noise?
Well, they would like the contract to go from the other side, but you see, that's not possible. Like sometimes we just have one access, and that's the access we have to work with. So that's it is really difficult because you can't make the car quiet. You do have to go there, but maybe there is a certain times they would like us to access it during the time of 9 to 5. I'm not sure when they are not home. I don't know what those conditions may be, but the thing is it will improve their lane, it will improve the scheme overall performance, so it is just a benefit to them. But I do understand that it is not the quietest operation. But when it is done, it's done.
Just to add to your question, Councillor Foley, once we've prioritised these areas, I guess one of the key hindrances in this project or in this particular area is the access itself and the number of accesses. Once we've identified where the priority areas lie, communicating with these ratepayers is the most important thing to us, because we may come up with some solutions where we may look to try and access through private land to get access to some of these critical areas, and that's imperative that we have these discussions with the local community. So, yeah.
Councillor Lambert.
You mentioned that you're quite surprised about how much actual gravel is up there. So, how did you measure that against what it used to be like?
So before we start this work, we kind of have the grade lines, design grade lines for the main rivers, but we didn't really have a design grade lines for the tributaries, and that's where probably the additional amount of gravel coming from is that we always estimated it as based on the survey, but on that survey we didn't have the design grade lines, so that's why now we have way better understanding of what gravel where and how we can kind of allocate the gravel to the future source. Even after the project, we kind of going to have way better understanding of where the gravel is and where the problem is.
So, are you looking at extracting up in tributaries too?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Councillor Foss.
Thanks. So there's about $29–30 million of activity going on, mostly upper Tuki by and large in that area. So that's really good. But part of the agreement, and excuse me, I just can't remember, with the Crown, and that. As you mentioned, there's many more truck movements, etc. So the increased carbon footprint because of this activity, where does that sit and how's that been managed?
So in terms of a carbon footprint or a carbon offset, that's not something the Crown or IRG have asked us to deliver, but it's something we certainly need to be sensitive about.
I guess our environmental outcomes can sort of target that particular, and this is a question that's been raised several times before. How we plan to structure this particular project, the requirement for local authorities and being able to allocate this material to local projects and identify those projects through local authorities. That's our first port of call in order to minimise that. Notwithstanding that, there's we have other options available to us how best to roll this project out, but our key focus is hitting those social procurement environmental outcomes.
Well, a question from Councillor Foss. How much did Councillor Foss say has been spent in this area? What could it be? Figure again? 30 million, was it?
So the whole package is 30 million. Upper Tuki is 8. The Heretaunga is 20, and the State Highway 50 erosion control was 1, and Waterway is 1 million.
Any more speakers? Otherwise, I'll have someone move, please.
Happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. And second, would you like to speak?
Just a great report. I found it very easy to read, very informative. Thank you very much.
That's good.
Councillor Foss?
Great presentation, thanks.
Any other speakers? Okay. All those who support receiving this update, say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Right, carried. Thank you very much. Members, I'll just ask if we can move an item forward because our presenter has to leave to go back to Wairoa. So if we can have item 13, the Whakake Catchment Pilot Project Case Study and Findings. We have no more than 15 minutes. Is that Kei te Pai?
Kei te Pai.
Okay, thank you, Nathan.
Kia ora katoa. Look, this presentation was actually given to the Māori Committee several weeks ago. It very much differs from that presentation. It was a request from Councillor Williams a little while ago to find or to explore a bit more the financial data that was collected as part of a case study project, so that's what I've focused on in this presentation. There is a copy, Annalie, there is a copy of a presentation being passed on to everybody. Yes. Just a quick overview. Many of you know where Whakake Catchment is. Very culturally and ecologically significant, and it's had a long history of our efforts in that area, including our Freshwater Improvement Fund project up there. Lots of good science, lots of issues around managing water level and that sort of thing, and it's been a hotspot and an area of MPI hill country erosion funding for the last 8 years, so lots of things have happened up there. This particular project was an offshoot of the Matariki funding, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Hawke's Bay Region Economic Development Strategy, and was also funded through MB and the PGF program after that. It was very much driven by the community and the landowners of that area. Much of the initial work was around using co-design methods and community engagement to build a wider understanding and alignment with all the different strands of work that were going on in that area. And as you may be aware through the paper that accompanied this, there's a long history of changes that we've had to contend with and navigate, and we ultimately ended up focusing largely in the upper catchment, working with landowners and doing farm planning and looking at mitigation options to address the issues up there. Fair to say that there's a lot of learnings and wisdom that we've gained through the challenges we've had to face, and many of those were covered in the Māori Committee presentation. The area in green, so this is Whakake Catchment, the red line outlining the catchment boundaries. The green was where we did all the farm plans, 9 landowners with multiple different blocks. Next one was just a summary of all the land classes through that farm plan. One of the benefits of doing all the farm plans at the same time by the same person has been our ability to amalgamate all that information to represent the wider catchment as a whole, which has been really valuable. You know, anybody who's missed out can learn from what we've garnered from this information. The key point to note, I suppose, is that there are actually 3 quite significantly different land classes in here, or geology in particular. You've got one at the lower end, one in the middle and one on the upper, and that relates to the photos I'm just about to show you. So this is looking, this was taken during the storm of 2011, the Easter storm of 2011, so it's not looking its best, and it was obviously really heavily and hard hit. That's that frontal area that I was referring to in terms of the parent materials there. Using the lake to orientate yourself, this is having a look at that from behind, and that storm obviously had a huge impact. Having lived up there most of my life, it's not the first time and it certainly won't be the last time we've had a storm like that go through that particular area. This is now looking back towards where the bulk of the farm plans were done and equally where our case studies were analysed, and showing you that there is actually quite different parent materials, and that influences quite heavily the severity and the types and forms of erosion that we have in that particular area. So just focusing on the case studies now, these were identified by the farmer groups themselves. They were particularly interested in the costs of change and in meeting what was outlined in their farm plans and equally what was required of them to meet the obligations under the NES for freshwater, which is primarily around stock exclusion. So we selected 3 farms. We used the farm plans and some subsequent visits to derive that works program and the management changes required. And we analysed the impacts of implementing that farm plan on the farm system, financial side of things, and production 5, 10 and 20 years out. At the same time, opportunities for increasing production were also identified, and we also laid out that financial impact and assessment, taking those production inputs on board. So the analysis included the costs of implementing erosion via pole planting, gully, stream bank protection, fencing and retirement, the costs of meeting the NES for freshwater, and equally the costs for offsetting greenhouse gas emissions by 5% in 2025. And I mentioned the production offset opportunities that were identified through that work as well. Of the 3 farms, the table here represents sort of farm summary information. Block A was a smaller farm, had significant bush on it. You can see it's 27.8% native bush and another 14.2% of kanuka. So there was a lot of native bush on this block. It also had a significant area of flats, quite a significant cropping operation, but also a very long and significant history of planting and erosion control in that area. Farm B was quite a bit bigger, in a slightly different area. 90% of that is steep. Very few flat areas, and another significant chunk of native bush on this property. Block C was a Māori trust with significant areas of flat. A key point I need to make on this is that we were unable to get actual financial information for farms B and C, and so we've used a surrogate in the form of the Beef and Lamb Farm Economic Survey data. So the table on the right just shows you the accounts analysis, so that is the total stock units, the stocking rate, and the EBIT return per hectare of each block, of each farm. So this is the summary of the works program. So each farm had a significant demand for poplars. The riparian fencing was between 1 and 4 kilometres required. Wasn't a huge impact on area and not a huge impact on stock units wintered. But the costs, as you can see, they did mount up. So you're looking at the works program varied between sort of 18 to 52,000, and the cost of implementing the NES between sort of 8 and 38. Probably the differential has a lot to do with the amount of area in flat. So the more steep land, the more the work program as part of the farm plan was a higher proportion of the cost, and whereas if you had more flats and more streams and rivers to fence off, the NES component was a higher proportion of that. In terms of the affordability of that, using the EBIT again, with the earnings before interest and tax, as a total impact on 1 year, it was between 19 and 21%. Very similar across all 3 farms. So what we used as an estimate of 5% of that total EBIT being a reasonably affordable or pragmatic cost for farmers to be able to afford in any given year. So based on that, to keep that within the 5% EBIT, that was about around 4 years to complete that works, assuming each one of those years is a good one. The final table down the bottom there shows the yield gap analysis, so that's the difference between what's grown and what's actually utilised. And two farms in particular had significant opportunity to make better use of that, and that was primarily through lifting the target live weights, improving the utilisation of pasture and adjusting the stock policies. One thing, having a look at that data, one of the interesting points to come out of it is the number of poles required. On average, there's 2.5 poles per hectare required for that farm, for those 3 properties in Whakakī. So that's, if that's an indication of the demand throughout the rest of the Northern Hawke's Bay, there's a lot of poles required. That's pretty much it. The other bit of analysis was the greenhouse gas emissions, and so as you're aware that by 2025 landowners need to offset 5% of their greenhouse gas emissions. We had a look at what impact that might be. We've assessed the carbon emissions from these properties using the overseer model. Not terribly huge, but it's around 1% of the total EBIT for the year. Or if we looked at a planting offset, it would be between 3.5 to 4.5 hectares of something like Pinus radiata every 20 years, based on 5%. What that table down below shows you is if that goes up from meeting a carbon commitment of 5% versus 10 up to 50, that certainly goes up quite significantly. If landowners were required to offset 100% of their carbon emissions, that would be 64 to 90 hectares every 20 years, and it would take not too long before some of these units would become uneconomic. And also, it's very much assuming the carbon cost per tonne at $32 at the moment, which could go anywhere from here. Just to sort of sum up what this work has provided us to some degree, and I suppose one of the issues that I can see confronting all of us in the future is it was very obvious, obviously, to work with the landowners to target stuff that was visible. They were more than happy to plant poles, attack areas that were obvious, that impacted on infrastructure or obviously impacted on water. The real challenge was convincing them to target land that was deemed as high risk but wasn't actively eroding, which is quite a different proposition. There's obviously another tier of investment required here, so we've made these assumptions on what to target based on what we know now. We do not know what limits or targets will be required to meet the fact that Whakakī is an outstanding freshwater body, and that equally through Kotahi we may have a different tier of obligations there as well. So that's a big unknown at this point in time. A key message from all of this is a lot of that work has really created a momentum in Whakakī, and there's some significant opportunities to build on this, both with the individual landowners, and they've all expressed, including the work going around Whakakī Lake, to a desire to work together and marching this forward. So hopefully we can start looking at bringing that catchment as a solid catchment group going forward. And I just wanted to reiterate the point that it's very easy to get see that it'll only take these guys 4 years to address the target, but it is an area susceptible with storm events. There's gorse and blackberry and markets and climate conditions and personal circumstances that don't necessarily allow that to happen. So the other thing to note is that there obviously was some significant biodiversity opportunities there. A number of those properties had at least 30% of their farms with an opportunity to do something around biodiversity protection, and obviously a thing that has been raised here on multiple occasions, there is definitely a production opportunity available as well. So that's pretty much it. That's my 15.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. Any questions for Nathan? Very short ones, because apparently legally you have to give your lunch soon. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for that report. It's really interesting to see that in such a challenging catchment, in 4 years you can cover the cost at a 5% impact on EBIT. The significant production offset opportunity on the 2 farms that you said you'd cover further in the presentation in terms of increasing the productivity. What were they in a nutshell? You've got about 30 seconds.
They're there, the bottom table there. So it was the potential yield gap is really the utilisation of pasture grown versus pasture with stocking rate and what potentially could be better utilised. So for Farm A, there was a potential gain of EBIT of 153,000, and for Farm B, it was 78,000. Like I said, it was primarily around lifting live weight targets, so weaning weights of lambs in particular. They were pretty light, and it was to take those through a bit further and finish them off at a higher live weight. It was also around improving utilisation, so a few more fences around the place and grazing management, and adjusting slightly the sheep to cattle ratio, those sorts of things. So they weren't huge infrastructural investments. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed, there were so many hands that went up. Councillor Foley.
Doesn't this closely align to our Right Tree, Right Place project? So at the start, you say a collaboration between MPI, but particularly Wairoa District Council. So how close have they been involved in this project? And the reason I ask is just because I feel like we're getting a bit of pushback, and so I'm keen to know what's their thoughts. Sorry, it wasn't me. No, it's a serious question. What are their thoughts at this stage of the project on this? Because this looks good to me.
They certainly started off with a hiss and a roar. They were very active in the initial stages when we were doing a lot of the co-design work in particular. When the focus went to the upper catchment, they did tend to drift off. The whole project in itself was really around afforestation in the first instance, and the reason we diverted was we failed to get any traction for supporting that from the community itself. That's not to say they haven't expressed the desire to take a right tree, right place type of approach. They're very happy to look at using trees at a bigger scale in strategic locations, but they certainly weren't that enthused about anything broader in that context.
Any other questions?
Just one quick one, Nate. Those pictures you showed of that heavily eroded soil, does the grass ever grow back on those patches where the soil goes?
I'm really keen to get a flyover just to have another look, because they have grassed over quite well.
Have they?
Yes, yes.
The science we've had historically is that they never return to their productive capacity. I think on average something about 70% of what they were prior to, and then obviously the more events that happen over time, the less the carrying capacity of the soils.
Yeah, there were a few sites that after 100 years they still hadn't retained their pastoral production.
Councillor Fenbeek.
Can you go back to that first photo of that look towards the lake?
That's a beautiful photo.
You find it?
It does seem to be a difference between forestry.
That one there? Yep. Well, that's an advertisement for us all having a shirt, because that's country that really needs to be planted up, you know, because that's not viable from a farming perspective in a lot of those faces, and I think that's where our erosion control. And if you would take that, you talk to those landowners and you have an agriculture consultant with you, they will prove very quickly that a lot of those faces are just costing the farmer the bottom line. And that 153,000 of improvement to EBIT would also include retiring some of that land that otherwise would cost to the farm.
I'll just go back to this map here. Oh, sorry.
That one, yeah.
So that's the area that you're talking about there. That is now gone into forestry.
Okay.
Councillor Graham.
I'll move.
Like to move to accept to receive the report?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, Nathan, you've done a great job in Wairoa. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. That was a really good report. It's a challenging environment, and I look forward to Councillor Van Beek meeting Craig on Saturday. Having a similar conversation we just had a minute ago. Thanks very much.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I would just like to echo Councillor Graham's comments about your work, Nathan, and the value of the report. But I want to say to you that the thing about your report is that it provides compelling evidence for doing this work. There's no question about it. Compelling. The case is unarguable. And the more people who see this, the better, in my view.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Please, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Foley.
Just firstly, Chair, the quality of the papers today has been great to see the work. This is our bread and butter, this stuff today. Thank you, Nathan. That I didn't realise that detailed work was going on up there, and just to see that work going around, how farmers can improve the environmental footprint plus improve their bottom line is we just need to get on and we'll do it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other speakers? No. Right of reply.
No, I'm fine,
No?
thanks.
Okay, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you, Nathan. Fantastic. So it is Kai time now, and I apologise for our other item that has to come after lunch. Ka pai? Awesome. Thank you very much for adjourn for lunch.
Thanks.